In the 29th episode of the American Reveille Podcast, we celebrate Labor Day together by undermining the labor unions and revealing their deep-seated socialist intentions. Many labor unions plan on strategically striking millions of workers to manipulate the polls this November, and they must be stopped before it's too late. Among these powerful unions are the bloated radical left-wing teachers' organizations, responsible for facilitating the indoctrination of our children into a radical cult-like socialist ideology. Some of our children's teachers are currently hurting people and burning down buildings, while their assistant principal yells, "F the police." Classy. As more and more people join our righteous cause, the labor unions are exposed for what they truly are: wicked. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Labor Day, September 7th, 2020. This is episode 29th, entitled The Labor Day Extravaganza. Labor Unions Are Crooked, Run by Socialists, and Fund the Radical Left. And of course, this is the American Reveille Podcast, and I am your host, James Lane. It's a very special Monday, the Labor Day special, as I said before. And if you have a job, it's safe to assume you may be enjoying an extra day off to try and relax as the world around you burns down and slowly sinks into the tar pits of chaos and confusion. Well, while you do your best to avoid the barrage of fake news, anonymous sources, and psychotic leftist rhetoric, let's take this time to look at an important subject that will most likely get brushed over this week. Labor unions, the ultimate socialist bear trap, the modern-day slavers of innovation and inspiration. Labor unions are throwing their name into the fight for power and showing their true colors as they literally, out in the open, with no intention of hiding it, reach down from their ivory towers and forcefully maneuver the little people on the political chessboard. Let's get right into the show, guys. From Fox News reporter Frank Miles, quote, "Unions representing millions of workers, from teachers to truck drivers, pledged to ramp up protests in the lead-up to the presidential election, with walkouts aimed at forcing local and federal lawmakers to pass police reform and address what they described as systemic racism." In a statement first shared with the Associated Press on Saturday, labor leaders from America's biggest public and private sector unions said they would organize walkouts for teachers, auto workers, truck drivers, and clerical staff, among others. The status quo of police killing black people, of armed white nationalists killing demonstrators, of millions sick and increasingly desperate is clearly unjust and cannot continue, says the statement from several branches of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the Service Employees International Union, and affiliates of the National Education Association, AFS-CME, SEIU, and NEA, include liberal membership that typically votes Democrat by margins as high as 80%. The latest development comes after a summer of protests nationwide, from youths to athletes. Some of the protests have turned violent, with rioting and looting in several cities. Let me say something really quick. Let me make something clear. It hasn't been some of the protests becoming violent. It's been a bunch of violence, a bunch of rioting, looting, mayhem, and murder with no actual justification. These people have no cause. Their cause is revolution, apparently. Anyway, back to the article. Quote, "They remind us that when we strike to withhold our labor, we have the power to bring an unjust status quo to a grinding halt. The union leaders said in the statement, "We echo the call to local and federal government to divest from the police, to redistribute the stolen wealth of the billionaire class, and to invest in what our people need to live in peace, dignity, and abundance." universal health care and housing, public jobs programs and cash assistance, and safe working conditions, the statement reads. The nonprofit Professional Employees Union, which represents several hundred workers at more than 25 civil rights groups and think tank organizations, told the AP it signed on to the union statement because the fights for workers' rights, civil rights, and racial justice are inextricably linked. Redistribute wealth, huh? Punish the rich, Universal health care, huh? This sounds like politics, like socialist utopia nightmare politics BS. What's this have to do with unions? The calls for justice include more police accountability, acts that would ban police use of chokehold maneuvers, and end qualified immunity for police officers, among other reforms, and the reallocation of police money to address mental health, homelessness, and education services in communities. Meanwhile, police unions have rallied behind President Trump with the Fraternal Order of Police and New York's influential Police Benevolent Association among numerous states and local unions endorsing the incumbent. Companies are faced with a which side are you on moment due to growing support for the BLM movement, said Maurice Mitchell, national director of the Working Families Party and a leading organizer in the movement for Black Lives, a national coalition of 150 Black-led organizations. Quote, if I was a decision maker that was considering whether or not to meet the demands of the unions, I would be scared, Mitchell said. This movement is spreading. We've been on the streets consistently. We're building on the electoral front, and now we're seeing this conversation at the highest levels of labor, end quote. You know what that sounds like to me, ladies and gentlemen? That sounds like a damn threat. Isn't it funny that the unions and the supposedly peaceful groups seeking to apparently help people are actually threatening them? Threatening people to vote and act a certain way or else. This isn't setting off alarms in anyone else? We're all trained to believe that the labor unions actually help workers out, but in fact, they've become socialist cesspools, a breeding ground for complacency, the bringer of destruction in terms of productivity, and a perpetual graveyard for innovation. These unions have created environments in which employees have nothing to gain while simultaneously having nothing to lose, no risk of famine, nor the chance of feast. Simple, complacent drones, incapable of success or failure, the perfect slaves for the left. Surprised? You shouldn't be. This has been in the works for many decades. The unions model themselves after socialist ideology. Come on, stealing the power away from the individual for the promise of protection and the benefits, yet much to no one's surprise, rarely do they deliver anything but the promise of stuffing their own pockets at the expense of the worker. Why is that? How did this happen? From Michael Watson at Capital Research, quote, Big Labor had sowed the seeds of its far-left turn in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and by the mid-1990s, they sprouted. Organized labor set the stage to break its liberal alliance with the managed market economy and Cold War consensus foreign policy and to demand ever-increasing government control of the means of production. They wanted to expand collective bargaining unionism to the government sector after the passage of the first state and local government worker collective bargaining laws in the late 1950s. The result was a rise in the share of the AFL-CIO and the union movement made up of government workers not committed to the Gompers approach of recognizing capitalism's legitimacy while fighting to increase labor's share of capitalism's spoils. Instead, the government workers' union saw an ever-expanding state as the path to lining their members and the union's own pockets. So, look, guys, right around the time Kennedy was assassinated, we see these significant changes. This from genuinely giving a damn about the American worker to sadly only giving a damn about politics and greed. We continue. By 1995, one of these government sector union leaders, then Service Employees International Union, SEIU, President John Sweeney, who reportedly joined the Democratic Socialists of America to show he would be more aligned with the left than Kirkland, took control of Meany's and Kirkland's old federation, having been elected with the support of other government worker unions like the AFSCME. It's a lot of acronyms. Today, labor unions represent a diminishing faction of the American economic life and one that largely relies on government largeness. You know, the thing we on the right oppose. Only 10.5% of American non-agricultural workers are union members. Nearly 49% of American union members, 7.16 million of 14.74 million, are government workers, as of 2018 data compiled at the Union Membership and Coverage Database. One consequence of unions' decline from mainstream mass movement to factual special interest has been political radicalization. Bingo, guys, there it is. One consequence of unions' decline from mainstream mass movement to factual special interest has been political radicalization. Haven't you noticed that a bunch of these extremists are union members? There's been a ton of teachers out there screaming, "Death to America." Oh, yes. Osama bin Laden's ghost is laughing at us for this. Let's go down the list a little bit. You've got Stephen Lysenko, the 9th grade assistant principal at Spencerport High School in Rochester, New York. You know, the place where they're acting like maniacs. You've got this supposedly average assistant principal just out there apparently minding his own business, peacefully protesting while screaming, "Fuck the police," among other insightful leftist slogans, with, of course, the news stations reporting it as such. Let's look at his Twitter account for a second, guys. Blacked out profile picture? Check. Mentioning social justice in his bio? Check. His last post from June 3rd, addressed to his 9th grade students. And keep in mind, he was filmed screaming, "Fuck the police," wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. His last tweet to his students from June 3rd states, and I quote, "To any students, past or present, who follow me here, know that when you post hashtag White Lives Matter, you are condoning white supremacy." Wow. This guy's he's a lunatic. This is who teaches your children, Rochester. What else could we possibly have here? Oh, here's a nice headline by Christina Lila of the Gateway Pundit. Hopefully I said that correctly. Quote, "Retired teacher under investigation by Capitol Police after threatening to shoot GOP rep Paul Gosar in the head." Well, ladies and gentlemen, sounds like there's a golden ticket in this Wonka bar. Let's peel her open. Quote, "A retired teacher is under investigation by the Capitol Police for threatening to shoot pro-Trump GOP Congressman Paul Gosar in the head." Gosar's staffer retrieved a threatening voicemail on Monday morning, which was left during the weekend. A retired teacher who was identified through caller ID as Margaret Kathleen Spangenberg of Glendale, California. Spangenberg. Really quick, we've had caller ID for a very, very long time. And this lady never ever heard of Star 67? So anyway, Crazy Pants Cat Lady left a 36-second message for Gosar threatening to kill him because he supports President Trump. Threatening congressional officials is a felony and carries penalties of 5 to 10 years in prison. Whoopsie daisy. This is what she said, folks. Quote, "So the way I see it, since you supported a child rapist who has 65 years of crimes and you are doing shit about COVID and I've had people die, I think it's okay for me to come with my gun and shoot you in the head. That's what we think of you, Mr. Gosar. You're a murder supporter and you are just going down. Murder, murder, murder supporter. You are going down and we'll make sure we'll send lots of protesters your way too. You're a real big fucking piece of shit." End quote. So, Guys, this isn't even the crazy part. Miss Margaret Kathleen Spangenberg identifies herself on her Facebook page as a retired gifted teacher and licensed insurance agent whose interests include elections and travel. And I don't even know what that means. Who the hell's interested in elections and travel? What's that even mean? You know what these people have in common? They seem to have lost their damn minds. Still having trouble swallowing this pill, guys? The leftist school teachers are so out of their minds that they don't even know what constitutes racism anymore. They've redefined history so many times that they're just beginning to come to terms with their own psychosis. The Washington Times just put out an article entitled "Professor Who Lied About Being Black Won't Teach This Semester." Just indulge me, guys. Listen to this. Quote, George Washington University is investigating the case of a history professor who allegedly admitted to fraudulently pretending to be a black woman for her entire career and said Friday that she will not be teaching her classes this semester. In a blog post that has gained international attention, a writer claiming to be Jessica Krug, a GW associate professor of history, writes that she is, in fact, a white Jewish woman from suburban Kansas City, and of course she is. The writer claims she lived most of her adult life under various assumed identities within a blackness that I had no right to claim. First North African blackness, then U.S.-rooted blackness, then finally Caribbean-rooted Bronx blackness, which, if anybody wants to take the time to explain the differences to me on social media, please go right ahead. Anyway, continuing with the article, the blog post attributed to Klug expresses deep remorse, apparently, calling the deception the very epitome of violence, of thievery, and appropriation. The writer blames unaddressed mental health demons dating back to childhood and says she frequently thought of confessing the deception, but, quote, my cowardice was always more powerful than my ethics. Folks, Professor Jessica Krug spells it out for all of us loud and clear. The left cannot come to terms with their own inner turmoil, their own bias and racist tendencies. In a desperate effort to hide these tendencies, they overcompensate like a cheating spouse, pretending to be on the phone with the cable repairman or woman. At the end of the day, though, the mirror never lies, yet most of them are too cowardly to ever admit their lack of ethics and honesty. These are the people teaching our children. In many low-income areas, these are the people raising our children. We keep asking what is happening, yet we don't have to look very far for answers. Folks, when we get back, an article from a former school teacher explains just how exactly our children get indoctrinated by this wicked leftist cult-like ideology. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Reveille Podcast with James Lane would like to take a moment to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into the show. It's because of great fans like you that we strive to deliver the best quality content one can create as fast as one can fling the pen. With that being said, a good little boy never misses his opportunity to sell himself, and though James would never ask you for your money, he would like to let you know that if you absolutely love this podcast, the writing, the art, its production, anything, please do us the personal favor of liking, sharing, tweeting, texting, and talking about this podcast. James Lane is a father, a husband, a U.S. Navy veteran, and is personally committed to the success of the American Reveille Podcast. Please email James Lane directly at podcast@AmericanReveille.com, or please visit our website at www.AmericanReveille.com. Now, Now, let's get back to the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the American Reveille Podcast. I am your host, James Lane, and welcome to the second half of the show. This, the Labor Day extravaganza, otherwise known as the Take a Crap All Over the Labor Unions episode. So, I told you before the break that I had a story that would help clear this all up. Guys, this is how it happened, so listen close. From the Heritage Foundation and by former teacher Douglas Blair, quote, "Your children are being indoctrinated. The education system designed to teach how to think critically has been weaponized by the radical left to push an anti-American agenda. As someone who has worked in the education system for 4 years, I have seen firsthand how your children are being ensnared by the left and their teachers. I worked with kids from ages 3 to 13 and saw the brainwashing that exists at all levels of education. The left uses a combination of propaganda and suppression to push kids into the ensnaring grip of socialism and anti-patriotism. First is the propaganda. Teachers will assign work instilling the idea that the pillars of Western civilization were evil and their memories deserve to be thrown in the trash. Here's an example. So I was helping one of my elementary school students with a homework assignment about listing famous Britons throughout history. She already had some of the more obvious ones: Shakespeare, Princess Diana, Queen Elizabeth. Well, how about Winston Churchill, I recommended. "Oh no, not him," she replied. "He was a racist and didn't think women should have rights. He wasn't a good guy at all." I was floored. It clearly wasn't something she came up with on her own. She was just regurgitating propaganda her teacher had taught her. All sense of nuance and critical thinking about the man who saved Europe from the Nazis was gone. Churchill committed wrongthink, so in the bin he goes. Another way the left propagandizes is through the normalization of its views and positions as non-political. The Black Lives Matter organization is a prime example of this. Many of my colleagues wore Black Lives Matter pins and apparel to school in blatant violation of school rules, forbidding political statements on clothing. When I asked for a justification of the behavior, I was told it wasn't political to support the group. It was a matter of human rights. The children would see these pins and clothes and connect radical leftist groups with basic human dignity. How dare you question Black Lives Matter? I was taught this is a matter of human rights. But it isn't just a matter of actively teaching that America and the West are evil. Suppression of wrongthink is equally as important to the brainwashing process. The lessons I was allowed to teach also were censored. I was preparing a lesson on Thanksgiving involving pilgrims and the American Indians, with an activity centered on making paper teepees for arts and crafts. Cue the progressive panic, by the way. Other teachers at the school were incensed that a non-Indian was appropriating Native American culture for an activity. Of course, these teachers weren't Indians either. They just wanted a virtue signal. The whole thing culminated in a hilarious incident where my colleagues tracked down the one teacher on staff that was 1/64 Native American and asked her if it was cultural appropriation. And in her esteemed authority, it was most certainly cultural appropriation. The school administrators pulled me aside and promptly nixed my project. The suppression extends to American religious values as well. I would try to engage my students with folk stories from around the globe to teach them world history and other cultures. Story time went on without a hitch until I decided to tell stories from the Bible. Other teachers began to complain that I was preaching Christian values to the children and attempting to convert them. Keep in mind, this wasn't a problem when I was sharing stories from other ancient cultures throughout history. Stories about ancient India and China were fine and encouraged as sharing unheard voices. After sharing the story of the Tower of Babel, I was told to switch back to non-Christian stories or face the consequences. The young adults who today gleefully tear down our statues of the Founding Fathers were incubated in our very own schools, groomed to burst from the education system and burn America down. The left argues the great men and women who built this nation are problematic and must be destroyed. Conservatives must demand an end to the indoctrination of our youth or face a new American public taught since childhood that this country shouldn't exist. Guys, that was an article from August 17th, just a few weeks ago, entitled, "I'm a former teacher. Here's how your children are getting indoctrinated by leftist ideology." That was by Douglas Blair. And it's a chilling realization of the truth. It is our "what is the matrix" moment. This is for all of us on the right, and it must be dealt with accordingly. We must accept it, and we must change it. Period. I need you to understand that the socialists taking over the labor unions have been a long-time strategy, and moving into teaching years ago happened to be a major part of that strategy. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission and the Young Democratic Socialists of America. This was written by actual school teachers in West Virginia, guys. This is real, and it should shock you and call you to action. Why is teaching strategic? Quote, socialists have a long history of involvement in the workplace. Socialists believe that workers create society's wealth and that the working class is the only class capable of governing society democratically. It is at the point of production that workers create value beyond what they are compensated for. This is what Marx called surplus value, which is realized as profit. While the vast majority of teachers are public employees, this doesn't remove us from the domain of capital. While teachers don't make a product that is sold on the market, we are necessary in the reproduction of a capitalist economy and the perpetuation of classes. It is teachers who train both socially and technically the workers of the future. When capitalist power is strong, so is the drive to squeeze the public sphere, to cut funding from universal programs like public schools and redirect it towards the market like private schools. The often abysmal funding of schools that helped spark the massive red state strikes of early 2018 made clear that even though teachers are public employees, we are not immune to the political and economic pressures of the billionaire class. So, folks, here we find the normal, everyday socialist propaganda. Teachers are marginalized, capitalism and rich people are evil, fight the power, fist in the air, yada, yada, yada. Next question. Why is education a key sector? If the Labor Department is a key site of struggle for socialists, the question remains why education is a key industry. There are certainly industries where workers are far more oppressed. An obvious question, then, is why we wouldn't focus on those. In short, while all workers deserve and benefit from a power and dignity that a union can generate, the reality of our political economy is that some groups of workers have more leverage than others to win political and economic demands for the working class as a whole. Some sectors are therefore more strategic to organize. Education is one of those sectors. Here's why. Education is the most unionized sector both in the United States and globally. While it might seem counterintuitive to strengthen unions that already have high density, big upsurges in unionization have often occurred because organized workers pushed their unions towards a more militant approach, which forced the unions to commit substantial resources to new organizing, what many consider labor's golden age. The CIO-led efforts to organize new workers in the 30s and 40s was a direct result of a split among workers in the AFL. It was the militancy of one group of organized workers. What would become the CIO? That increased the power of the working class as a whole. Folks, this is absolutely terrifying stuff. There it is, right in front of you in plain English, right in front of your eyes. This is the entire reason the teachers are striking, and it has nothing to do with COVID and everything to do with the Karl Marx Fan Club Association. By the way, if anyone wants to fact check me, head to teachers.dsausa.org for their entire subpar manifesto. This document literally tells us the strategical value of the teachers' unions to the Socialist, and as we've seen, they've been very weaponized against the American people. The very folks we trusted to teach our children are agents of evil in this fight against tyranny. You want to defund something? You want to call something systematically broken and racist? How about we start with the American public school system and leave out brothers and sisters in blue to do their work in peace? The evil of these teachers' unions is borderline satanic as they strip disabled and English-struggling children of their dignity to further their political affiliations and alliances. The LA Times reports that the LA Teachers Union won't even allow small classes for those with special needs. By Howard Bloom. Quote, citing safety concerns, the leader of the Los Angeles Teachers Union said Friday it opposes reopening campuses for small in-person classes or even one-on-one services for students who are disabled or learning English, even though county health officials have cleared the way to do so. And I didn't realize English as a second language and learning disabilities were underlying conditions that could be worsened by COVID-19. But anyway, some outside advocacy groups pushed back against the union's position and the unwillingness of the LA Unified School District to address the issue directly and publicly. The students that have disproportionately suffered over the last several months are students with disabilities and English learners, said Vanessa Aramayo, executive director of the local group Alliance for a Better Community. They must be immediately prioritized and they must get the services they are entitled to legally. The learning loss is significant, so there needs to be urgency. Students with special needs for services such as speech therapy or orthopedic manipulation are among the children whose education have been most deeply hurt since the coronavirus forced school closures. Many of them are unable to receive the hands-on services they need, and many parents cite regression in their children's progress. So folks, regardless of what doctors say, regardless of what teachers say, regardless of what experts say, the teachers' unions will not budge. This is an obvious political play, and it's going to blow up in the left's face as more and more voters are pulled to the right and cast their ballots for Donald Trump on November 3rd. They don't care about our children. They don't care about education. They care about one thing and one thing only. They care about power. The pure, unsuppressed, and ultimate power to remake this country into one gigantic gulag for anyone right of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So on this Labor Day, I need you all to do me a favor. I need you to take a few moments to reflect. I need you, if you're in a union or if you've never really even thought about unions, I need you to ask yourself a few questions. Am I capable of standing up for myself, or do I need a handler to do it for me? Am I an individual with a free mind and free thoughts who believes in finding his or her place in this world, not being assigned to it by some overlord? Do I strive for constant improvement, or would I rather rot away in dull, subservient complacency? Do I believe in the protection of everyone's individual rights in this country, equal, beautiful, and free? Or do I believe in the enslavement of people's hearts and minds for the promise of safety and security? Am I willing to trade the red, white, and blue, the old glory, for the rusted iron maiden of eventual communism? No, I'm not. I will not. I will never. And neither will you, patriots. Neither will you. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to give us a listen. I'm currently building up the accounting department, if you want to call it that. I just opened a bank account for American Reveille LLC, and I have months and months of expense reports to fill out. These are baby steps, but hopefully will lead to the eventual means of significant expansion, which includes upgrade and video, quality content, and quantity, not to mention substantial internal upgrades. All good stuff coming down the pipeline to help build a mighty force and a mighty voice on the right. As you've seen, I am and always have been 100% authentic with you. I haven't begged for money, and I have lovingly poured in thousands and thousands of dollars of my own money into this movement. I'm still not asking you for your money. You know what I want? This is what I need for you. I need you to spread the word about this podcast. Please leave a 5-star review on Apple and share the heck out of the articles, the videos, and the podcasts that you enjoy the most. If you come across anything you think I can improve, please tell me. If you come across a website error or an article typo, let me know. You can always reach me at jameslane@AmericanReveille.com or through the contact form on our website at www.AmericanReveille.com. I'm always responsive and easy to reach and welcoming of any criticism or suggestions, anything to break up the constant influx of hate mail. A quick prediction or two from me, guys. Be prepared for a possible announcement this week on stimulus, something quick to help the people, and watch as the Democrats sink even further into the quicksand as they try to push an alternate reality on hardworking American people. Like I mentioned 4 weeks ago, the party's heading towards destruction and rebirth in the form of 2 separate organizations. Brush up on episode 25 for the full scoop, guys. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and all BS aside, try and take some time today to regroup, take a breath, find that baseline, and realize that in order to get through historical times, we all have to go through some historical stuff. This is all part of the process, and as long as you pay attention, remain stoic, and learn from it, we will find nothing but freedom on the other side. New articles and a ton more throughout the week. Thank you guys so much for listening, and have a fantastic Labor Day, guys. Peace!